Preston. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to kick things off, yeah, who are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going? Like just a little bit of background on kind of how you got here and how you got into tech.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Los Angeles, actually a suburb of Los Angeles, Pasadena. Went there through high school. I actually went to high school downtown LA, and then I went to the Midwest for college. Did a really short stint in Washington D.C. and then moved to San Francisco. My wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, was studying at law school at UC Hastings in downtown San Francisco. And so once we got engaged, it felt like the logical move to move back from DC to San Francisco. And when you move to San Francisco, there's only one thing to do. In 2000, and I think it was like 12, I was in real estate at the time, and it was definitely the next logical move was to get into tech. And it felt like the right time, right place, right opportunity for me. And I started meeting all these founders, experiencing all this energy from San Francisco back then, which was truly like it was like the tech pinnacle, I think, of San Francisco. And so jumped into tech as a result of that.
Very cool. You're working in real estate. You're kind of surrounded by this startup energy, but still, like making that leap from a stodgier industry to eventually selling tech to a stodgier industry is still like a one that not everyone necessarily makes. Like, how did you know that you're ready to kind of pursue what ended up becoming Revolutionize?
Yeah. So, as you said, I was in private equity real estate. I was managing and acquiring large portfolios of multifamily buildings typically. And it was the same kind of repetitive process over and over again. There wasn't a lot, it was just a formula, right? And there wasn't a lot of ingenuity that went behind my day to day job. And so I found myself after doing it for about 8 years, just being very bored of the whole thing. And when I came to San Francisco, I started meeting all these founders. One of my best friends in San Francisco, a guy named Sean Conway, started a company called Note Hall back in he actually founded it at University of Arizona, and he sold it to Chegg. And we were buddies. He actually moved down. He and his brother moved downstairs, like the apartment down below us on Jackson and Jones in San Francisco. And we just got to become really great friends. And when he sold Note Hall, it was kind of this aha moment for me where I was like, oh my God, he didn't sell it for much, right? He sold it for like 12 million bucks or something like that. I don't even know
Mm-hmm.
if it was that much, but I looked at my wife, I think the night I sold it, and I was like, Sean just sold his company. And I looked at her and I was like, I feel like I could do that. Like, I feel like I could go and make that happen. And she's like, yeah, I think you could too. And I was like, I don't know what I'd do though. It was like kind of like one of those, like, I have no idea. And she's like, well, what's the biggest problem that you face now in your job? And I was like, well, it's like the data that I have to wrestle down and manage and look at every single day. And it's always in arrears. And I have to spend hours and hours collating it. And I don't get any like actionable information off of it. And she's like, well, you should go do that. I was like, yeah, I should. And so
Sounds
that's
like a
how
VC
Rentlytics.
right
I
there.
know, right? I know my wife needs to like she picked the wrong profession in the law for sure. So it was that was the first like seed of the idea of what became Rentlytics. And I started to build like prototypes. I had no idea what I was doing, right? And so I started meeting with everybody I could, meeting with Sean and guys like James Bashara, who's still to this day a really good buddy of mine. And I just said, hey, I think I know what I want to do, but I don't know how to do it, right? I have no idea how to build it. And so went through the process of figuring out what it was that I was trying to build, finding a co-founder. This was all before I quit my job to know like and feel secure that I was going down the right direction. Finally got it to a point where I felt solid about it, like the direction I was headed, had a co-founder kind of in the wings who was maybe ready to jump ship from his current job, who was a developer, an engineer, and went into my boss at the founder of the company, the private equity company. I said, hey, I've got this idea. I think I'm going to go pursue it. And but hey, maybe like we could incubate this together. Actually, like this is very relevant. Like my job is like this basically replaces my job. Like if I build
Mhm.
this, and he's like, give me 24 hours to think about it. Came back 24 hours later, and he was like, listen, he's like, I'm a real estate guy. I'm not a tech guy. He's like, I want to focus on our main portfolio. And now I'm going to put it back to you. He's like, you have 24 hours to come back to me and tell me what you want to do. He's like, we want you here. We think you have a huge future. But if you want to go do this, I'll support you in that. And so I went back and with my wife, and I was like, this is like the opportunity, right? This is the time to do it. We don't have kids. You're working in the law, making good money. We're living in San Francisco. We bought our place, pretty secure in that manner. It's like, if not now, then when? And what? And so decided to leave. Went back into the office the next day. Told him I was leaving, and left on really amicable terms. And that was the beginning of Rentlytics.
One element that I'm talking later today with a mutual friend of Steph and I is about co-founder searching. So before we get into some of the Rentlytics piece, like when you were co-founder dating, and it's not like, it doesn't sound like someone that you've necessarily known forever. Or maybe they were. Like, how did you know that when this person was the one, and like, how did y'all go through the different trials and tribulations to figure out if you actually were going to be able to make it or not?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've gone through a couple different journeys now, starting a company, and finding the right co-founder has always been, I think, one of the most challenging aspects of it. I don't think I did it perfectly in the first two, but in the third one, I just decided to pick my brother, and that was like an easy decision. I was like, I'm just going to go with somebody I really trust and I know, and I've known forever. And that's got my back and all of that. So in at Rentlytics, it was a little bit, I didn't come from the tech world. I didn't have a name to me. And so I was searching for basically anyone who was like ready to go. I met my co-founder through a mutual friend. He was a developer, kind of like great for early stages, right? Could hack together a prototype. But I definitely think that I had to hire in a VP of engineering pretty quickly into the business to handle a little bit more of the like higher level administrative functions, technical architecture, things like that. And just given what happened at Rentlytics, and I can talk a little bit more about the origin story about how we first got to market and all that, but we kind of stitched together the early prototypes of the app with like bubblegum and duct tape, and it definitely did not scale. And so we had to do a lot of re-architecting over time, and to the point where even the original kind of database schema was not 100% kind of exactly how we wanted. It was actually like the root of the schema was based on the wrong things. And so and then re-architecting that on the fly over time was Herculean. It was and it created an environment where we were spending so much time taking down technical debt that we weren't able to focus as much on new feature building as we grew and scaled. And that was definitely problematic as we got going. For another company that I did called Awning, I was one of the original co-founders of that. One of my co-founders in that was he was my former CRO at Rentlytics, really like a great sales guy. And then we found a technical co-founder who was one of the original founding members of Ease, the weed delivery business. And Shri was more of like, he could be technical, but he was definitely more of like product mindset, growth orientation, technical mindset, and could grow with the company. And when before I actually started StoryCo with my brother, Shri took over that business as CEO. I stepped back. Danis kind of went into a co-founding role as CRO. And I think that was a good team ultimately, but I just didn't feel like I was needed on a day-to-day role within the business. And, and then I found my brother the third time around, and it was like one of the things that were really important to me was trust and somebody I could rely upon, somebody who I knew was like wicked smart. And we brought in more of a technical first hire, or really second hire on that business. More of our two other kind of quasi co-founders in that business were product guy and an engineer, but more. The product guy's more of like experience and product and UI, and he's like insanely good at his job. And our chief technical officer / CPO is a little bit more engineering product minded, and he's amazing at his job. And those were guys that JP, my brother, had worked with for 10 years before that. So a
Yeah.
lot of trust built into those relationships as well. So yeah, been through it on the co-founding front. And I think that it's just one of the most important yet hardest things that any founder has to go through.
I want to save most of the time for the pod to talk about kind of what you're up to now, but maybe one more question, at least for me, on Rentlytics. Like, some of your customers for that company, Starwood, BlackRock, USAA, PIMCO, like some of the largest companies or entities in the country, in the world. What's it like selling to one of those and kind of convincing them that, maybe what started as a rinky-dink startup, it might have still been a rinky-dink startup when you were selling to them, was worthy of their time and their dollars?
Yeah, enterprise sales sucks. I hated it. It was one of the reasons why I never wanted to do it again. After that, I swore it off. Like after that, I was like, I'm never doing enterprise
Well,
sales ever
you were
again.
also selling to the hardest, some of the hardest
Yeah,
enterprises to
yeah,
sell into.
100%. And
Yeah.
also, I sold the first couple $1 million like single handedly. I was going to conferences all the time. Like I wasn't around, right? I was
Yeah.
traveling all the time. I was on planes. And so anybody who does enterprise sales needs to realize that it is a full-time job for the CEO just to do enterprise sales. And these big customers want to see you. They want to know you. They want to be able to call you. Also, there's just like many different levels within these organizations where you have you have different stakeholders, you have decision makers, you have blockers, you have people who experience the problem firsthand, and understanding and navigating kind of that map of those organizations was also something like a bit of a learning experience for us. Like BlackRock is a good example of that, where we got into like more of the CIO role, and he was in charge of all of their big implementations, and he was like, okay, like it was great to meet you guys, like thanks, bye. Like this is a guy whose like job it was to make sure that everything was running smoothly, but he didn't feel the pain point of their asset managers, the people that were actually managing the assets on a day-to-day basis, who were getting reports and arrears and managing a multi-billion-dollar portfolio on 30-day stale information. This is BlackRock, right? And so finally, we got in with actually, I did a conference, I did a speaking gig, talked about what we were up to, what we were up to, and more so like a TED style talk about analytics and data and just making decisions and predictive analytics and things like that. And she saw it and she was like, I am experiencing this problem. I'm like, well, really? We met with your CIO and he didn't think you guys had a problem. And she's like, he has no idea that we actually do have a problem. And so finding, and then we got in through her and then rounded up all the other asset managers at the business, and they all universally loved what we did. And so that was a learning experience. It's like find the stakeholders who actually care, use them as champions within the organization, and then move into the right people who actually need to make the decisions. So that was a big learning lesson for us.
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, maybe just talk one more thing on Rentlytics. Like, what was the process? So you were selling to all these various financial institutions. You kind of had cracked a little bit of the nut in terms of what enterprise sales look like. Maybe you're hating it at the time. Like, when did you know it was the right time to sell?
Well, we had raised a Series A. We raised I can't remember, like we had raised like maybe 14 million total. We raised a C to C extension and a Series A, like 8 million or something like that. And we were raising a Series B, and we had a term sheet from a relatively new VC in kind of the prop tech space. They, on the day of closing, they came back and said, we need to bow out. And it was like one of those situations where it was nothing that we did. It was definitely on them. Some internal thing happened, and there was 3 months of runway in the bank. We had kind of exhausted our options, and we had some hard conversations that I had to have with all of our current investors. And it was a really interesting time for us. It was a really stressful time. And so we, as investors, agreed. One of our investors came to the table and said, okay, we'll give you another $4 million, but we want you to, this was a strategic investor who had led our Series A. They said, but we want you to at least look into what it would look like to sell the business. And I said, fine, but I want to go and try to continue to raise a Series B. I wasn't sure that I was done with kind of the life of the business. And so we went out, we hired a broker. We also went down the Series B track. We got a Series B partner to the table, a really good firm. Like I wouldn't call them top tier, but they're right probably next to top tier at a pretty decent valuation around what we sold the business for, actually. But at the same time, the bankers we had a ton of interest at the table from these strategic partners to sell the business. And we had 3 publicly traded companies that were like jockeying for position and putting bids in and LOIs and like raising price and all of that. And after 10 months of hell, I was like, I'm so ready to be done with this business. It was a pretty straightforward decision for me at that point. And we ended up selling to the top bidder, which was RealPage, and the business kind of moved into the RealPage ecosystem after that.
Very cool.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I know we're transitioning into talking about your newest venture, but I feel like an experience like that, like not only would I be done with the actual business, I feel like I'd be done with entrepreneurship. I guess I'm curious about like the recovery period after that. Like, how did you spend your time? What did you do? How did you feel? And I guess when did you feel ready to jump into something new?
Yeah, so I should have. This is one thing that I wish I had done differently. So anybody who sells their business, I think, heed my advice on this. Is I wish I had taken more downtime, but I felt the need. I was like, oh, but I'm 38 or whatever I was at the time, 37. I'm in the prime of my career. I just had an exit. Like I'm ready to go again. Let's go. And so I stayed a year at RealPage, and I walked away from a big management incentive package at RealPage actually for another 2 years. Because I wanted to start awning with my other co-founders. It's awning.com. It's like a really cool, it's like Zillow for real estate investors. And if you go to the site, you can see just how, what an interesting business it is. And I really got kind of committed to the idea. And my wife was like, you need to slow down. You just like take a beat. Like you just got through this like really massive ordeal with Rentlytics. But I think for me, it was just like, I just wanted to keep going. And I felt convinced that I could do it better the second time. And that was like, I think foolhardy thinking for me, where I should have just hit the reset button, taken a pause, really thought about like how I wanted to architect my life going forward rather than just like moving into a new startup. And so I did after I left. So it was very clear that I wasn't ready to go into a new startup. And one of the reasons I stepped back from awning was to take a beat. And so I did. In 2018, I took a beat. I spent like 2 years, just like actually like 3 years, just like digging in and exploring and studying industries and investing and doing super founder stuff. And that was like a good period of my life where I could really do stuff for me. Got my body right, got my mind right, started meditating, like got healthy, all of that. And that was spent more time with my kids. And then once I felt right, that was when I felt like I was ready to kind of move back in. And it was only because my brother really approached me about this specific opportunity that I thought I was like, okay, this is something I could maybe do for 20 years and can maybe do it differently because my brother is my co-founder in this and it feels different. And it's something that I think is really interesting at the cross section of a lot of different things.
Yeah. I think that, an interesting kind of segue into here and obviously the crypto markets have kind of risen and fallen, but it's been something that an area of interest I know for you for a long time, or at least for a while that I've known you. Curious, like, because I think it's important for the ethos of StoryCo at the very least, like curious, like how did you get into crypto? And then eventually when you started talking to your brother about what was happening in Hollywood, how did the two worlds intersect?
Yeah. So my cousin, a guy named Ronil Rumberg, is a founder of one of the, I think probably one of the best crypto consumer companies out there called Audius. It's like, it's like Spotify. He doesn't like this phrase, but it's like Spotify on crypto rails, basically, allowing any, or like SoundCloud on crypto rails, allowing anybody to be their own producer, basically, and monetize their own music and not have to go through a record label. But also they have the ability for record labels to go on to Audius. And so it's as soon as I got out of awning, I was like, where should I start? Like, I'm super interested. All the smartest people I know are going into crypto, and Ronil definitely fits that mold. He's like the smartest dude I've ever met in my life. Like, graduated CS Stanford 3 years. Was one of the youngest partners at Kleiner Perkins ever, and he got me into a DAO called Metacartel Ventures, which was an investment DAO that was comprised of a bunch of really amazing founders who are in the crypto space, like founders of Axie Infinity and Ocean Protocol and Audius and folks like that. And so I started making investments alongside these guys, started meeting founders, started really diving into the ecosystem, and started really understanding what the underlying ethos of like non-shilly crypto actually look like what people who were building for the future actually represented. And I became convinced that crypto represented a huge opportunity now and in the present, or now and in the future. And it just offered this new model for access and ownership and transparency that I think we suffer from in traditional tech worlds right now, where you don't own your data with Facebook. You don't own how they advertise you. You don't own how people ultimately, like Equifax, like loses your data, and no one's holding them accountable right now. And I think crypto fixes ultimately a ton of these problems, where you have these centralized companies and decision makers that control the rails of these like really massive industries that are fundamentally broken, and the consumer has no control over their future. And so crypto to me represented a new paradigm for consumer control. And ultimately that kind of led me to going down a bunch of different rabbit holes within the crypto space. And one day I pinged my brother. I was like, yo, you've been talking about how fucked up the entertainment space is, about how you believe, and he was working with Tyler, the creator, and he created this direct to consumer app called Golf Media, and saw how creative people are out there, and how Tyler connected with his fans, and how people were adding to the fabric of what Tyler was creating when they put stuff out there. And so he had seen like Hollywood and how kind of broken it is, how centralized it was, how so few companies control the rails of that system, both the distribution and financial rails of the system. He had also seen how folks like Tyler were able to penetrate this fan base and create this kind of creator economy and direct to consumer kind of app that allowed him to create anything that he wanted and really control his own destiny. And both of those things were really, I think, epiphanies for him that we connected to crypto, and ultimately StoryCo was born kind of out of those two insights.
Very cool. In terms of, kind of getting things going and the building of like, you have this idea for StoryCo, which is, again, marrying both kind of crypto and kind of the ethos of crypto and how that intersects with Hollywood. And so there's like kind of a really interesting foundation. I guess the manifestation of that foundation was still kind of TBD at that point. So maybe talk a little bit about like what StoryCo is up to, if only to allow folks to see like how you evolved from like this kind of general idea to like specifically what y'all are doing.
Yeah. So the general idea was basically that we wanted to create a new way for creators to be able to add to new IP universes, right? So creators and fans to be able to influence, be able to create alongside. So you see it all today in fan fiction, fan art. People want to create, people want to be closer to the stories that they love. But today, these IP holders like Disney and Fox and Warner Brothers, they want to hold their IP really, really close to them, and they don't want to allow these amazing creators that are all out there now, and we're seeing an explosion of them kind of throughout the world right now, because the tooling has gotten so easy to use, and the knowledge base through the internet has gotten so prevalent that there's an explosion of creativity that's happening out there, writing, illustration, animation, like all sorts of creativity that's happening out there. But yet these folks can't really create premium Hollywood level content in today's world. And so StoryCo is really born of that idea. Now, how we manifested that, how we brought it about, like it's definitely gone through some permutations. We kind of said, like, we don't really know what it is we're fully building. So why don't we build out our own first production and build out the rails of the platform alongside that first production. My brother had all these connections to Hollywood. They had produced some amazing content previously. And so we went out and we said, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to raise a seed round, and we're going to go see if A-level Hollywood creators are willing to create in this new way. Are they interested in this new paradigm? And we were able to go and meet with like 40 to 50 showrunners, and they were all really intrigued with what we were doing. One of them, a guy named Kyle Killen, who was the showrunner for the Halo series on Paramount Plus, Awake on ABC, another big series on Fox, came to us with an idea, like a whole new original idea that fit perfectly within our mold. He already knew crypto. He was like kind of crypto pilled also, and wanted to have this more kind of interactive story that he told, where the fans and creators could be more involved in the core story. It was exactly kind of the ethos of what we were building. So we partnered with Kyle. We had a relationship with this amazing artist duo named Shelby and Sandy, based out of LA. We wanted them to come in and kind of build out the illustrations and the settings and the scenes and the characters for what we were building. And ultimately, what we decided what we were building was basically, think about it as the step before what you would make before you made a movie or TV show, right? It's like almost like an immersive storyboard, if you think of it that way. Today, when you make a movie or a TV show, you make a storyboard. It just doesn't have any audio. And if you think about the spectrum of of content today, on one end of the spectrum, you have single medium stuff like a podcast or a book or a manga, and then all the way on the other end, you have multimedia content, which is like movies and TV shows, which is, animation plus sound plus voice plus, right? And all the way up here is really, really time consuming and expensive to produce. Down here, that's how you incubate content today. And a lot of the incubated content that comes out of here ends up resulting in TV shows and movies. And we're seeing it more than ever, especially games now. And so what we wanted to do is kind of find that middle ground where it's multimedia content. It's a combination of illustration and sound effects and music. It's like a smashing up of like books, podcast, like fictional podcasts, and manga. And it's almost like a visual novel. And that's essentially what we're producing. But it all starts with like a script, right? So we're building this back-end platform where you can drop a script in, and we're tech enabling the production process. Basically, you drop a script in, and now with AI over the last year and a half, as AI has really come about, we're leveraging generative AI to help with like some voices, some sound effects, some of the illustrations, and we are basically, you drop a script in, and automatically reads the characters and the settings and the dialogues. And then we have created this distribution path where it feels like we're calling it a scrolling audiographic experience, where it scrolls and you basically get to experience this 3D immersive story where you hear it, you see it, you can read it. So it's like kind of feels like a living, breathing comic book almost. That's what we're building at StoryCo.
Very cool. How much of the, so you have this element as well that I think is quite interesting, and curious, like how much are you leaning into essentially the choose your own adventure element of it all? Like you were doing like, on real life and IRL kind of like activations and kind of getting, as much community involvement as possible, and getting folks to essentially like vote on different elements of the story itself. Like the thought that I had is like, I'm like, shit, like I was a Lost fan when Lost was on. Maybe I'm dating myself, I guess. And even the ending of Lost, like I think if the community could have been a part of the decision, I think we would have like maybe saved ourselves a little bit. And there were fan forums and there were like different mediums for this content to be impacted, but yet you had these couple of folks who did an amazing job up until then. My opinion kind of flubbed the ending. So how do you think about community and fan involvement as it relates to story?
Yeah, so we think choose your own adventure is a little bit of like a crude mechanism right now that's being used for fan involvement, which it doesn't really work. I don't know if people actually want that. What we think more so is that people want to be involved and have a say in the direction of the franchise. They want to create alongside the franchise, and you see it in video games today also, where they want to have like side quests, they want to have interactive elements. And they want to have like mod packages, right, where they can like maybe change an ending and see if if fans, or like the director's cut, like the Snyder cut for the Batman for Justice League was like a big thing, right, where the director had one vision, the studio had another vision, and so you see this all the time in premium content. but there's no way to do that today. And so StoryCo is really built around that idea, right? Where so we're building. So going back to kind of what we partnered with Kyle and Shelby and Sandy, and we're building out this first production called the Disco Ball, and it's this interactive, immersive, scrolling audiographic experience, and we partner with these A-list actors: Stephanie Beatrice from Encanto and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Costa Ronan from The Americans and Homeland, Lionel Boyce from The Bear, Teddy Sears from The Flash and Masters of Sex, and they're voicing all these characters. And what we want to do is like build a AAA rated piece of content, attract attention around it, and then bring in creators from all over the world to help build out the fabric of the story. And so we've created two different ways to do that. One is called co-create. And so right now it's very top down, but we're opening it up to be very much bottoms up and just free creation as well, where anybody can come in and create a new character, a new illustration, a new backstory, a new piece of music. Right now, again, they're top down. So we say, oh, we want a piece of music here. We want to illustrate a set of scenes here. And we've had just the most amazing creators from all over the planet coming in and submitting for these things. We've only had 5 co-creates so far, and we've had hundreds of applications for voices and illustrations. We had one winner, this guy named Okafor Anu. He's a art student out of Nigeria, and he submitted. His art is amazing, and he now has his art featured in the Disco Ball in the main narrative of a backstory of one of our characters who's being voiced by Costa Ronan, written by Kyle Killen. It's a guy who probably never otherwise would have been able to enter the Hollywood ecosystem otherwise. And so this is the idea. It's like, can you make a system that's more egalitarian and create more opportunity for people who are outside the system today, where Hollywood's such a location-based system? Can we make this an internet-based system where anybody can create? We also introduced this something called profit points, where we gave away 50% of future profits in the Disco Ball. And that's all now orchestrated on chain, where we give you your own wallet when you come in. It all feels like very native Web 2 experience, but we're operating off of a lot of Web 3 rails. And you get an ERC non-transferable token called a profit point that represents your future share of profits in the Disco Ball. So if there's ever a big monetization event, we'll automatically distribute royalties and rewards to you if you've earned profit points. And so the creators of these co-creates and even people who have submitted are adding to the fabric and value of our ultimate IP, and they're earning profit points as a result of their creations. The next step of this is that as we build out the Disco Ball, we're releasing chapter 1 of the Disco Ball. It's been a long time coming next week. And we're working through all the PR and all the social stuff right now. And so by the time this comes out, it'll already be out. So people can check it out at story.co/Disco Ball and experience the story. And there are these interactive elements where, as you said, Lior, like you can become almost like a part of the story. You're a character in the story, helping the characters that are in the actual story to kind of drive their mission forward. So less the choose your own adventure and more interactive kind of ARG elements that exist with it. You earn story moments as a fan along the way that are added to what's called a story pass. And it allows us to gamify this and for you to earn rewards and reputation associated with your fandom. And it allows us to see who are the biggest fans of this universe, because ultimately those are the people we want to give the most say in over how we dictate the future of this franchise. And eventually we want to bring these creators and these fans closer together, right? And we're going to be doing this by allowing fans to vote on and have influence over these creations and determining which ones get into core canon, highlighting the amazing creations that our team can't be the arbiter of every single one of them. And so how do you bring fans and these creators closer together and create ultimately a network where the dividing line between creators and fans actually gets like really, really blurred? Because I think that's like a really important element over what's happening in the creator economy today is, the distinction between a creator and a fan, or a consumer and a creator, is like totally getting like just blasted away. And that's like one of our core beliefs. And that's something we're really leaning into.
I'd love to hear more about how you managed to recruit such like accomplished traditional like Hollywood stars and producers and creatives to participate, because I think, that's super impressive to me. I think whenever there's like new technology trying to kind of disrupt or do something different that a legacy industry has done for a really long time, there's always lots of resistance. And despite that, I'm sure you faced you've managed to get really great partners. And so I'd love to hear more about that process and journey.
Well, with Hollywood, I think you can see it today, right? There's been a strike. There was a writer strike that just ended that happened for over 9 months, I think it was. There's now an actor strike. There was a director strike that was happening all at the same time. It's just is a symptom of the underlying disease of like the things that are broken within Hollywood, in my opinion. And people see this, right? And you see it in the news, right? There's tons of nepotism. There's tons of sexism. We've saw it through Harvey Weinstein. Like Hollywood is this like very top-down model where if you don't fit into a certain mode or model that they exactly want, that like 5 dudes who determine every single thing that get out on the air that they want, and you're a writer and you're in a writer's room, and you have an original idea, and then all of a sudden it gets picked up and they get shelved for 5 years, and now they own that original piece of content that you'll never get to see the light of day of. And so writers today and even actors are just like in a really toxic environment, in my opinion, at least most of them. And they want to see a new pathway for creators because they were all creators themselves. You know, Kyle Killen is a guy who's like, we have his backstory on our website with the introduction of the disco ball. He's like, I was like a carpenter. I was like working as a carpenter, and I was hoping I could become a writer. And all of a sudden, I wrote a pilot before my daughters were born. I was trying to write a book, and I turned it into a script, and it was called, and it ended up being called The Beaver. And it was like this guy, and it was played by Mel Gibson, who talked through like a talking beaver. And it was played by another character in the movie was played by Jodie Foster. And this is a guy who like struggled to make it in Hollywood for a long time. And I think you hear about these stories over and over and over again, just people who struggle and struggle and struggle and struggle to find their opportunity. And all of a sudden they have this break, but a lot of people don't, you know? And yet my brother talks about this all the time. Like Evan Goldberg's a good example. He's the writing partner of Seth Rogen. And Seth was on Freaks and Geeks, but before that they were trying to sell Superbad like all over, right? And Superbad was the story of their life, Evan and Seth, right? Before they went away to college. And Seth, Evan always talks about this. He's like, I could be working in a comic store in Vancouver where they're from and have the same mind that I do now. But I'm now Evan Goldberg and my best friend is Seth Rogen because we wrote Superbad and it got picked up. But there's a million stories of people who are just as talented as I am who that story never did get picked up and produced. And so we want to be that platform where those amazing people who are undiscovered, which we think that there are millions of them out there, can be discovered ultimately. And I think the actors and people who are associating with StoryCo, who have gotten involved in this project, believe in that underlying ethos.
I think to Steph's point, though, as well, you know, you can imagine people, you know, there's going to be some folks that are going to kind of see themselves in these creators for StoryCo. But then there's also, I imagine, some entities that probably are not super worried about you at the moment, but might be over the course of time because you're essentially like trying to, you know, dismantle their business model. And like maybe they'll adapt, maybe they'll die. But like, how do you think about like, you know, thinking about some of these entities as, you know, friends maybe in some cases and folks, like, do they have to be converted to StoryCo? Like, how do you think about that dynamic?
I don't think so, right? If you think about the big players in the space right now, what are they looking for? They're looking for quality content that's already been vetted in another medium or another format, right? It's why we're seeing like Last of Us and now anime is like pretty big right now, kind of getting picked up. And so StoryCo, I think, ultimately can be this medium to prove out early kind of incubation of content and fandom around this content. And then we could be really actually live very harmoniously with the old legacy kind of distribution people like Netflix and otherwise, where they could license some of our content. I also think that in the future, we could also get to a point where we're producing kind of premium movie, TV shows on our own platform as well. But that's probably further on down the road. We have to build up a library of content first. And we think the best way to do that, whereas Netflix did it by buying this content or licensing this content from kind of Fox and Warner Brothers, we think we need to do that by building up our own content and making and tech enabling basically the content delivery platform and creation platform. And so that's kind of our model is like create incubation level content, build fandom around them, let's build a network of people kind of on the StoryCo platform. Let's allow them to monetize it like Substack on StoryCo. but then also be able to license that content up to linear television or movies for people who really need that content. Yeah, I think so. So I think ultimately we can live harmoniously. But if you look at historically Hollywood, even if we become this like really disruptive entity, and like let's say we have like all of our own content, and AI gets to the point where, or our budgets get to the point where we can produce this content in a very premium format, then I don't see us as like killing the old industry. I think there's always going to be room for it. If you look at history of Hollywood, right, you've gone through a couple of different really big like paradigm shifts in the space. You've gone from like from regular broadcast television to cable television. You've had DVR and DVD that kind of happened in that space as well, and then you had streaming happen as well. And with all of them, new funding mechanisms, new distribution methods were kind of at the core of them, and it didn't kill the predecessor, right? Like ABC and NBC still exists, HBO still exists, Netflix now will still exist even if we become this new really interesting platform. And because their content IP is like really interesting, right? Like IP has a life and it lives on, despite how you distribute it ultimately, because there's like a lot of resonance with IP, I think ultimately. But I do think that we can become this like major player, because right now we're seeing not only a paradigm shift in the way that content is distributed and the way that content is financed with the like new rails of the internet and crypto, but I also see that now we have a new event, which is how content is created now can be disrupted, which I think is like a really, really big one. It's maybe bigger than the distribution and the financial rails being disrupted, but all three happening at once with like blockchain, AI, and spatial computing kind of all coming to life at the same time. These like big, huge, massive paradigm shifts in how people consume, watch, experience content. All those are happening over the next 10 to 15 years that we think that we're really primed for kind of leaning into those.
Yeah. In terms of the moving parts, like how do you make sure that this doesn't become, there are like a couple different things happening here as well. And so, how do you make sure that everything's kind of working harmoniously, that all incentives are aligned? Because you essentially have these like various entities, both from the creator side, eventually from the distribution side, from like how you're going to, allow the creators to monetize themselves versus having like centralized creators. Like, how do you kind of think about balancing all these things?
We're not there yet, frankly. We're so focused on the disco ball right now and trying to figure out like, and so the relationship with the existing cast and crew was already established kind of behind the scenes. We're tech enabling our own production processes right now. We're bringing new creators into the fold and allowing for more freeform creation and more fan and creator interactions and network building that are happening within the StoryCo site. And so really we're thinking about that. We've already done the profit points thing. I think right now the incentives are properly aligned for the disco ball. As we get into second, third productions, I think our biggest questions really is around, do we want to open this tooling up for anyone to create and at the risk of having low quality creations and or projects that like kind of lift off but like never quite get off the ground and like crash, right? Because they just don't get enough attention or they don't get enough creator kind of activity around it. Or do we want to be more of like a tech-enabled production hub where we are helping kind of A-list creators create really amazing creations? You can imagine a situation where like J.J. Abrams comes in and it's like, I want to create something really fucking cool, like that's super experiential and super interactive, and I want to do that on StoryCo, and we then are the production kind of assistant to J.J. Abrams, where we hand over the tooling to his team. He creates something really awesome. We tech enable the whole thing, and we push it out through our distribution rails. And then you can have these like big nodes on the network and have smaller nodes come into those bigger nodes and like build out these like nested worlds kind of associated with that. And so those are really like the core questions I think that we're going to be wrestling with for like the next year and a half to really see like how open do we make this thing? How much content and how do we like balance quality versus quantity on the platform? So those are some of the big questions that I think we're going to be facing over time here.
Leah, should we
Yeah, just maybe a couple more, two more questions on my end, but what are like some like so you've kind of been on this journey and it's been super interesting to watch from up close and from afar as well. What are things that you've thought at the beginning that you've kind of still think, and what are some things that you thought at the beginning that you've kind of adapted to, let's say?
Yeah. Well, when we started, crypto was like in its like crazy state, right? And so a lot, I think, and the industry, crypto Web3 moves just so fast, and it's gone through so many different permutations. Even while we've like been operating behind the scenes with StoryCo, early on we thought that we could, create maybe something and then just monetize through NFTs and royalties off those NFTs. Like that's clearly not going to be the case. So thinking about monetization in other ways other than just NFTs is like a big thing for us. In addition to that, just like thinking about community first versus product first was like a big paradigm. I think kind of something for us to where we started very community centric, and we spent a lot of time like nurturing this community. We established a producer community, and it's been a lot of like work for us. But yet it's had some payback. It's had good payback for us, but like I do question whether we should have just stayed in stealth, like built out the product, and then launched it like without having to operate kind of in quasi public for so long. And so community first versus product first, I would say that everybody was like on the bandwagon of like community first and like you'll figure out your product. Like FWB is like a perfect example of this, like where it's like got a ton of interest in like a Discord channel. It's like, and A16Z threw a bunch of money at them at a high valuation, and it's like, wait, what are we? Oh, we're just a Discord community basically right now, and now they're starting to build some product around like organizing their community. But for us, we always knew what we wanted to build, but we were like, oh, let's go community first because that's what everybody in crypto is doing right now, like going community first. Not only that, but like I think that there's also a lot of like ill will towards like NFTs and crypto in general right now. It just like in general, like out there, and it's because of things like what happened with SBF and with Luna, and just like a lot of scammers in these NFT projects that are out there. And like we're a docs team, we have a pedigree. Like JP and I haven't earned a salary to date within this business. Like we're in it for the right reasons. But there's still this, like, I think like NFT is just a dirty word. Crypto is just like a dirty word to a lot of people, especially creators, I think. And so we definitely have moved, I think, shifted our axis away from Web3 as like, we're a Web3 company to we are a Web3 kind of, we're a blockchain enabled company. And that's one of the many pieces of technology that we use to like, to push our business forward. But really what we are is we're a consumer entertainment tech business is like really the heart of what we are. And we use AI, we use blockchain to help us achieve our goals, but we are not a Web3 company in the same way that like Bored Ape Yacht Club's a Web3 company, right? And so we have shifted a lot of our like our naming conventions and our like the way we talk about our business away from like token and NFT, and we call our the soulbound NFT like Story Pass. You create your account instead of like getting a wallet. If we do ever have NFTs, they'll probably be like more like digital collectibles or digital art or something like that. And so I think that's definitely been something that's been like we've moved towards like where I think the environment needed us to move to with regard to that.
Yeah. And maybe last question before we get into rapid fire, maybe talk a little bit about, I know you're kind of getting ready for this big launch, but yeah, maybe talk a little bit about StoryCo today and like kind of where you expect to be, by the end of, let's call it 2024.
Yeah. So, so today we are launching the Disco Ball. We've created the distribution and fan engagement experience. We've created the ability for creators to come in and add to the fabric of the Disco Ball. We've created a really rich environment within our Discord channel. We have something called Collabs, which are learning opportunities to come in and learn from really accomplished screenwriters and illustrators and musicians who are not even adding to the Disco Ball. They're just amazing at what they do. And some of them do add to the Disco Ball, but some of them don't. And we want this to be an environment where we're learning, we're empowering creators, and we're creating opportunities for them. And so the Disco Ball is launching. We hope to get a lot of eyeballs on that. We hope to get a lot of creator excitement around that. We hope creators are inviting other people into it. And we want to start seeing this flywheel effect take hold within the Disco Ball, where creators and fans like if you get more creators in, then that yields more fans yields more creators. And it starts to have like kind of a flywheel, a little bit like what Roblox has today. Very, very kind of creator economy centric. In terms of by 2024, we want to continue to build out the tooling. So tech-enabled production tooling, the ability to continue to have the ability to drop the script in and really like automate settings and scenes, and the entire distribution experience pretty much automated. And we want a robust network. Ultimately, we probably want to have a few more stories on the platform by that time as well. And to my point earlier, whether those are kind of A-list stories that we work in tandem with some A-list Hollywood creator on, or maybe it's a community-centric story, or maybe it's a story, or maybe it's just a process where we just open up the tooling. That's yet to be decided. And so, but definitely a few more kind of net new stories on the StoryCo platform by that time as well. Proving out that we can monetize this thing as well, I think is also a big deal. So we're thinking through our monetization strategy actively as well.
Awesome. Should I kick off rapid fire, Lior?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Justin, these are meant to be like top of mind, whatever comes to mind first, answer in a sentence or last type of questions. So the first is the founder that you look up to most.
I'd say Naval Ravikant is probably my number one.
A book that most changed your life.
The Almanac of Naval.
That's on my to-do. It hasn't for a very long time. I still need to read that one.
It's definitely changed my life quite a bit. Yeah, from as a father, as a founder, as a husband, as just living my life. Yeah, it's an amazing book. A lot of thoughts in there.
What job would you want to have if you couldn't be a founder?
I'd be a baseball coach, I think.
Oh, cool. Love that. Your favorite account, and this can be anything from like a meme account to a Twitter account, newsletter, anything that you really love.
One of our investors, one of the reasons we brought him as an investor is because he's my favorite, is Packy McCormick. He lives in New York, actually, and he runs a blog called Not Boring and a podcast that he's doing now called The Age of Miracles, and all his content I love it. I love his content so much.
Your first entrepreneurial endeavor. So I know we talked about your early companies, but this could be something like a fun college initiative or something you did when you were younger. It doesn't have to be a serious company.
So I was one of the founders at Notre Dame. I went to ND, called ndtoday.com. It was like 2003, 2004. And it was like a small college website. It was like early genesis of the internet. And we had, kind of like a Craigslist style postings for like roommates and things like that, discussion boards, and then Zuck came out. I graduated in 2005, but Zuck, right along that time, I remember seeing Facebook being like, "Oh fuck, this is what ND Today should have been." But I did that, and we were like selling local ads from like the local landlords in South Bend and stuff like that. It was a really fun experience. Honestly, I still keep in touch with the other co-founders and the other people on campus, like all the other entrepreneurs who were on campus at the time, like definitely knew each other, and so we were all kind of this tight little group.
Oh, that's so cool. It's like the original Facebook. That's what I'll call it from now
on. Exactly.
And then the last question is like a mega trend that you're most excited about. Can relate to your company or the industry you're in, but it can also be more broadly as well.
I'm really excited. Like I talked about this a little bit, but yeah, the mega trend that I'm most excited about is this creator economy, and the way that AI is going to just change how people can create. I think that storytelling and content creation is going to fundamentally get disrupted as a result of what's happening with AI. We're seeing early glimpses of it right now, like all kind of like if you go into like AI videos on Reddit, you can see what people are tinkering with, and it's like all not great, but you can see what maybe the future looks like with AI assisted and AI enabled tools that allow anybody to be a creator. And we've seen already creator economy take off with like TikTok and YouTube, obviously, but that's all like fairly crude content, all using your iPhone, talking to the camera. Mr. Beast has obviously kind of elevated into more premium content of live action and reality TV, but it's still reality TV. And so, but at what point are we going to get to the place where like anybody can create like a Spider-Man like or a Spider-Verse like animation, or a live action movie? I think all that's coming, and I'm pretty excited for it.
Awesome. Justin, thanks so much for coming on. This has been great.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks so much.
Justin.